A critical review of the Biden inaugural speech. I was disappointed in the Biden speech. He had an opportunity for unity, to heal our nation's wounds and bring us together. Instead, he gloated over the political capital that the fallout of the January 6th storming of the Capitol gave him, boasted that he would undo the trade and foreign policy of his predecessor, and threatened the Republicans in Congress to do things his way or else. Hooray for unity! A lost opportunity wasted. The Biden inaugural had three main focus points. 1. There was an audience of only one person intended for this speech, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, the chief obstacle to his domestic and international agenda. 2. There was no mention of the vaccines that were developed last year under President Trump. By presenting the choices facing America as no hope without Joe Biden's leadership, Joe Biden hopes to extract legislative leverage against the Republicans in Congress. 3. Patriotism is redefined as obedience to Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. Donald Trump made the right decision not to sit through Biden's speech. President Trump's speech at Andrews Air Force Base was uplifting, a message of hope for the future, to believe in America and to reflect on America's accomplishments, such as development of vaccines to stop coronavirus deaths. Joe Biden, by contrast, was as sour as a lemon. Now I see Bernie Sanders saying, "Damn right we will," when asked if the filibuster will be used to enact socialist legislation. The filibuster was only outdated and racist, Obama's term, when it suited the needs of the Democratic Party. All of their rhetoric in 2020 was just BS to get into power. It sets the tone for the inauguration. Jennifer Lopez sang before Biden's swearing in. Looked to be about 100 people in attendance down on the actual ground. Lightly attended, I guess you could say. With all of Joe's pronouncements last year about social distancing, I guess America took it to heart and distanced themselves from this inauguration. Amy Klobuchar introduces the swearing in of Joe Biden. She seems awfully happy for someone who wasn't picked by Biden or the voters. Trump hatred seems more on display than pride in Biden at this inaugural. Biden's good buddy, Mitch McConnell, is right over his shoulder. She couldn't wait to throw Trump overboard, thinking by denouncing him they were saving the grand old party. It's a sincere reaction for me to react favorably to hearing "Hail to the Chief" as Biden kisses his wife and daughter. It's a happy moment for our nation. A peaceful transition of power is our nation's sacred birthright. It doesn't happen automatically for much of the rest of the world. It's something we should always be damn proud of as Americans, for America. This is Joe's moment to bring our country together with unity, and without rancor or division as promised. I especially am looking forward to not hearing anything of a divisive or judgmental nature against the 73 million Trump voters in last year's election, or against the vast majority of peaceful attendees at the Save America rally on January 6th of this year. As Biden reaches the podium to begin his speech, you can hear the 100 or so cheers of the gathered elite establishment, and nobody else. A signal that the D.C. swamp won this election. The triumph of multinational corporations, a one-party state. There's scattered applause as Joe praises how democracy has prevailed.
The will of the people has been heard, and the will of the people has been heeded. We've learned again that democracy is precious. Democracy is fragile. And at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed. So now, on this hallowed ground where just a few days ago, violence sought to shake the Capitol's very foundation.
He references the January 6th protest and storming of the Capitol. I wonder if he counts the confirmed BLM participation in that storming as rocking the foundation of the Capitol.
But the American story depends not on any one of us, not on some of us, but on all of us.
This is hinting at his themes last year, where obeying his edicts on mask wearing and lockdowns defines your patriotism. By obeying him once he's in charge. Now he is.
We've come so far, but we still have far to go.
I thought Obama healed our nation 4 years ago. What was left undone in Obama-Biden's 8 years of perfect rule?
Once-in-a-century virus that silently stalks the country. It's taken as many lives in 1 year as America lost in all of World War II.
This is a switch. At every speaking stop last year, Biden said Donald Trump personally murdered every COVID victim. Now it's a once-in-a-century virus, not the Trump virus caused by an inattentive madman.
Millions of jobs have been lost.
And millions more would have been lost had Trump enacted a complete national lockdown a month earlier, which would have gone completely against the knowledge and advice of every expert on the planet. You should have praised Trump for not crushing our economy as completely as you wanted him to, Joe.
A cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us.
A tie-in to the 1619 Project, for which every school will be ordered to begin indoctrinating public school students with, or face withholding of federal funds. A common Biden tactic, it would seem. Also, Obama-Biden had solved all racial injustice from 2008 to 2016. So why did Joe Biden fail the last time he was in charge?
The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer.
The cry for racial justice went up in Democrat-run cities and Democrat-run states in 2020. Some of them ruled by rich white Democrats for 60 to 70 years straight. Isn't the problem rich white Democrats keeping people of color down? Seems to me that politicians like Joe Biden were the problem, not the solution. Who was it that passed prison reform, Joe? Oh, that was President Trump, something 8 years of Obama-Biden did not do.
A rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism, that we must confront and we will defeat.
Wow, he just lied here. No mention of Antifa, BLM, burning down 25 American cities last year. In keeping with Joe's speeches from 2020, not one Democrat rioter caused looting, arson, statue pulling down, or violence of any kind. Joe Biden lied about his message of unity right here.
It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy. Unity. Unity.
Translation: you are only patriotic if you obey Joe's nationwide mask and lockdown edicts.
Uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause.
As Joe explained repeatedly last year, patriotism is defined as following his edicts from Washington.
Uniting to fight the foes we face. Anger, resentment, and hatred.
Wow. Sounds like he summed up an Antifa BLM riot last year in Chicago, Atlanta, Minneapolis, Portland, Seattle, Richmond, New York City, Baltimore, Kenosha, or Dallas.
We can put people to work in good jobs.
Joe stated at every speech last year that he as president would define what a good-paying job would be. That's not the president's job to determine what good salary is. That's my right and my prerogative. This is a difference from centrist government and free enterprise that people like Joe Biden will never understand. It's not his job to set my salary.
We can overcome the deadly virus.
Unity would involve thanking the previous president for his early lockdown on travel from China and Italy, and his vaccine work on Operation Warp Speed. Where is Joe's unifying message for the half of the country who did not vote for him? Just a few words, Joe. That's all it would take to get us on board.
We can deliver racial justice and...
What does that mean? Why didn't you do that for 8 straight years? Are you going to order all white Democrats not delivering racial justice to resign? Trump delivered this with his long pardon list of black parolees in his final week in office.
We can make America once again the leading force for good in the world.
This is evil. Joe is saying here that America was not the leading force for good in the world for the past 4 years. Joe, Donald Trump kept his campaign promise to not get us into new brushfire wars and to draw down our commitments to the endless wars that you and Obama were incapable of resolving. How was Obama's global drone strike policy a, quote, leading force for good in the world, unquote? It wasn't, Joe. This speech is not unifying.
Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal that we're all are created equal and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart. The battle is perennial.
Joe Biden is anti-racist. If you disagree or differ with him on any policy, any approach, any issue, any bill, any agenda item, you are a racist and the enemy that Biden is fighting against. This is sophistry and a complete lie about Donald Trump and his hard-working American supporters of all ethnicities, creeds, colors, sexes, and origins. What a jerk Biden is. Your opponent is not racism, Joe. This is not unifying. It's divisive, polarizing, and hateful, to an extent I never even heard Barack Obama speak. Joe Biden is a race baiter and divider of America, far worse than his boss ever was.
We can join forces, stop the shouting, and lower the temperature.
Joe, it was your choice to divide our country over a nonpartisan virus, which no candidate has ever done in the history of our country. You called President Trump a mass murderer guilty of genocide. And here in this speech, you just called Trump voters and supporters racist. You are the shouter. You raised the temperature, Joe.
For without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury. No progress, only exhausting outrage. No nation, only a state of chaos.
The Democratic Party created artificial divisions to increase their power at the expense of our former national unity. Joe Biden, you did this to us and our country for the greed of power and money, and for no other reason. The chaos was a tool you used to put yourselves into office. Chaos was your aim and partner throughout. I'll give an example. Throughout 2020, Donald Trump used every avenue of his office to try to unite, calm, and comfort Americans over the coronavirus. Democrats saw this approach as conflicting with their aim of overthrowing Trump, so they mocked, derided, and called Trump a liar at every turn, day after day, for all of 2020. Whether it was over Trump being xenophobic for blocking early travel from China, or calling Trump a fraud and liar for promising in June a vaccine by the end of 2020, Joe Biden and his team had to keep people frightened and terrified out of their minds through November 3rd so that they would vote for Joe Biden and not Donald Trump. Joe, you did that solely for your own power, not to unify our country.
And unity is the path forward. And we must meet this moment as the United States of America.
Now we can unify, after you divided our country with riots and a virus. No Republican tried to divide our country over your handling of swine flu in 2009, Joe. Why not? Because they weren't monsters. You are the monster and the evil that divided our country, not Trump.
We have never, ever, ever, ever failed in America.
Except when America decided you failed and elected Trump instead of Hillary.
And we must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured.
The entire American news media openly campaigned and editorialized for Joe Biden and his party, manufacturing stories every day to benefit their party of choice.
And here we stand, just days after a riotous mob thought they could use violence to silence the will of the people.
Smearing 100% of the peaceful attendees of Trump's Save America rally who were there at the opposite end of the Capitol watching him speak in person. The new president just called every grandparent, woman, and child peacefully listening to President Trump speak on January 6th, a violent insurrectionist.
To stop the work of our democracy, to drive us from this sacred ground.
But it was not sacred ground in 2018, when Kamala Harris incited abortion activists to storm the Capitol, invade the Senate, and they were led by Chuck Schumer's cousin, Amy Schumer.
It did not happen. It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Not ever.
It happened during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, and your vice president instigated the insurrection.
The right to dissent peaceably within the guardrails of our republic is perhaps this nation's greatest strength.
So why didn't you praise President Trump for his precise words advocating peaceful protest? Whole Democrat cities burned in 2020. Why does Joe think those were peaceful protests?
Yet hear me clearly. Disagreement must not lead to disunion. And I pledge this to you. I will be a president for all Americans. All Americans.
Then why divide us over a nonpartisan virus? Why frighten people so you could get into office? It didn't have to be this way, Joe.
And I promise you, I will fight as hard for those who did not support me as for those who did.
To his credit, this is also something he said as a 2020 candidate. But in this speech, he just labeled all Trump supporters, voters, and rally attendees as white supremacists and violent insurrectionists.
There is truth and there are lies. Lies told for power and for profit.
Like Kamala Harris lying that no virus developed in 2020 could be trusted, she frightened a lot of people.
But the answer is not to turn inward, to retreat into competing factions, distrusting those who don't look like you.
One, that's who Joe Biden thinks Trump voters are. Two, you divided our country needlessly for the gain of the Democratic Party. This was evil intent and an evil goal. You made us the enemy, Joe. Why? And you're still at it.
Or don't get their news from the same sources you do?
Rich for him to say, as 99% of the American news media campaigned as an official arm of the Biden-Harris campaign. That wasn't news.
We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue.
Which you say after winning total monopolistic control of all national legislative and executive branches.
Rural versus urban.
Isn't that why your entire party and news media screamed their hatred of the Electoral College for 4 straight years? Because it gave rural voters a voice? Until you won this election by swamping rural voters with urban votes, that is. Like Bernie Sanders saying that he now values the filibuster, all the news articles attacking the Electoral College disappeared once Joe Biden won.
Conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts.
Translation: do not oppose me on any legislation, Mitch, or you are the problem and a racist to boot.
If we show a little tolerance.
Opposing Joe Biden is intolerant. We see how this goes. The intolerance of the militant left for the past 4 years, not the problem, according to Joe. I have not heard one lecture or correction by Joe Biden for those who burned churches, looted stores, pulled down statues that other people paid for, from Joe Biden as of yet in this speech.
We need all our strength to persevere through this dark winter.
In combating the virus, Trump had a message of hope. You had 1 million reporters, news agencies, Hollywood entertainers, and Democrat activists screaming their rejection of Trump's message of fighting this virus together as a united nation, because it conflicted with your goal of absolute power. You used a virus to divide America solely for your own power. That was not unity, not love, not togetherness. You won office by destroying our national unity, and still you blame Trump and his voters in this very speech.
We must set aside politics and finally face this pandemic as one nation.
Why the hell wasn't that your message 11 months ago? Joe Biden should have said this back in February and March of 2020. We've got the videos, we've got the speeches of Joe Biden using a non-partisan virus to divide and frighten tens of millions of Americans into voting for him. You did this to our country, Joe, not Trump. Why the hell didn't you get up on the stage with Trump and praise the efforts of the CDC, of Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, the same team that worked for you and President Obama, because you valued power more over unity? You are a damned liar, sir. Only now, after obtaining absolute power, do you seek unity. A little late.
As the Bible says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning.
Why did your party ridicule President Trump when he defended all of America's churches from being burned by Black Lives Matter, as they did down the street from the White House last year, when Capitol Police prevented them from storming the White House? I guess that wasn't sacred ground in 2020.
We will get through this together. Together.
There is no reason this should not have been your message for all of last year. It wasn't in 2020. You used a virus to frighten America into voting for you, which no one has ever done in the entire history of our country. Power should not be valued over national unity. I hope you're happy with the result.
The world is watching all of us today. So here's my message to those beyond our borders. America has been tested, and we've come out stronger for it. We will repair our alliances.
By taking back all the payments to NATO and our troop deployments that Trump secured promises of our allies to pay more of their fair share, Joe just flat out stated here that he is going to stick the U.S. taxpayer with the bill of funding NATO and funding troop commitments in Germany, Japan, South Korea, and everywhere else that big meanie Trump secured increased funding from our allies. Trump also signed new trade deals with Mexico, Canada, South Korea, China, and Japan. What does Joe need to repair from those treaties signed and ratified into law?
And engage with the world once again.
Not only is this a lie, it's an outdated lie which was promoted by think tanks and foreign policy pundits back in 2016 before Trump was even president, that he was xenophobic and would withdraw our country from the rest of the world. Instead, Trump defeated the Islamic State that stymied the Obama administration. He checked China's and Russia's ambitions with sanctions and shows of military force and alliances, and prevented our country from entering into a new war or even World War III. How was that not engaged? Joe's a complete liar, and the lie is scary because it shows Joe is criticizing Trump from attacks made by other people before he even took office. Does Joe know it's 2021 and not 2016?
Not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges.
That's good, because you're criticizing Trump from withdrawing from the world, which never happened.
And will lead not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example.
China, Russia, Iran, and Syria love these empty words of inaction.
We'll be a strong and trusted partner for peace, progress, and security.
The nation-states who consider themselves the chief rivals of America are laughing themselves silly over this.
And in my first act as president, I'd like to ask you to join me in a moment of silent prayer. Remember all those who we lost in this past year to the pandemic.
It is an improvement that Joe has changed his approach from the campaign in personally blaming Donald Trump for murdering every person who died of COVID. But he's still campaigning here, still being partisan, still not uniting, still dividing America against itself. How? By not crediting any of the amazing research, hope, and real progress that was made last year with the development and deployment of real vaccines that work, due in part to the previous president's early leadership working with the CDC, private industry, in Operation Warp Speed. Even now, in his brief 20-minute speech, Biden cannot bear to extend any olive branch of credit to the scientists who worked at the behest of President Trump to develop vaccines which people started receiving after Christmas. Biden is the divider-in-chief, not a uniter.
Those 400,000.
This is Biden's first decree. You are to think in the following manner. 400K killed by Trump in 2020? But in 2021, that's the hope and healing of Joe Biden. Trump killed your grandma, but Joe Biden healed you and healed the nation. That's going to be the media narrative. It will be enshrined in your children's school history books 5 years and 10 years from now. Watch for it. They intend to win the battle of history by riding with the monopoly of power this election just gave the Democratic Party.
Amen.
Remember when Trump was accused on a weekly basis of imposing his religion on you and the rest of the nation? Democrat officials can invoke religion and faith and receive zero attacks from the news media, Hollywood, or leftist activists. It's a nice double standard to have, and there are thousands of others you'll see after today.
We face an attack on our democracy and on truth.
This is not uniting. This is milking what happened on January 6 in the nation's capital, while sweeping under the rug the 100% Democrat-approved riots, arson, and looting that occurred over 2020. This is milking one protest while pretending the others did not exist, except in terms of blaming white supremacists for anything violent that happened in 2020. Joe is repeating this attack over and over in his inaugural address with a purpose: to browbeat every Republican in the House and Senate to not oppose the Biden agenda in any shape, manner, or form.
Growing inequity?
You mean in Democrat-controlled states where Americans to this day cannot go to work, pay their bills, attend church, or send their children to school? Joe never once criticizes the harsh lockdowns of Democrat governors or Democrat mayors in 2020 or 2021 because he wants to extend those lockdowns to the rest of the country.
The sting of systemic racism?
You mean in cities run by white Democrats for 60 to 70 years? You got that right, Joe. When are they going to elect Republican conservatives in places like Atlanta, Baltimore, Detroit, New York City, Chicago, Minneapolis, Sacramento, Portland, Seattle, or Boston to end that systemic racism by white Democrats?
America's role in the world.
You mean your plan of ceding rule of the Middle East to Russia and Iran, and rule of the Pacific to China? That's what Trump opposed you doing when he took office.
But the fact is, we face them all at once, presenting this nation with one of the gravest responsibilities we've had.
Joe can't stop campaigning by attacking his predecessor and his policies, even after he's won. Joe, You won the election. At some point, you can stop attacking the guy you replaced. Unity, remember?
Now we're going to be tested. Are we going to step up? All of us? It's time for boldness.
Translation. I'm talking to you, Mitch McConnell and congressional Republicans. Obey me, or I'll call you racist seditionists.
We will be judged, you and I, by how we resolve these cascading crises of our era. We will rise to the occasion is the question. Will we master this rare and difficult hour? Will we meet our obligations and pass along a new and better world to our children?
Again, not one word of hope with the delivery last year of working COVID vaccines. Instead, Joe's message continues to be the winter of darkness with more darkness ahead, because he has to keep Americans fearful, keep Americans frightened, to extract as much legislative leverage as possible against his enemy, the Republican Party. Joe is still campaigning with the same messaging he had before November 3rd, because he needs Americans afraid, not hopeful. Biden wants total obedience from Congress.
America, America, I gave my best to you.
Every word of Joe's speech is about obedience, and this is in keeping with his 2020 speeches. Go watch the videos and read the transcripts at rev.com, where Biden redefined patriotism as obeying his lockdown orders that he would give as president.
Let's us add our own work and prayers.
I pray the Biden agenda fails. It's un-American, and so are the stated goals of everyone announced to be joining his new administration.
Our children and our children's children will say of us, they gave their best. They did their duty. They healed a broken land.
Who broke it? You did, sir. You and your selfish political party and ideology. You don't respect our Constitution, our Founding Fathers, our Bill of Rights, or the great experiment the founding of our republic signifies.
Thinking not of power, but of possibilities, not of personal interest, but the public good. And together we shall write an American story of hope, not fear, of unity, not division, of light, not darkness, a story of decency and dignity, love and healing, greatness and goodness. May this be the story that guides us, the story that inspires us, and the story that tells ages yet to come that we answered the call of history. We met the moment. Democracy and hope, truth and justice did not die on our watch but thrived.
This wrap-up is a repeat of his 2020 Democratic National Convention speech, but nobody will notice. The darkness came from Biden and his campaign. He made surviving this virus worse than it needed to be. Also, his party could reclaim their rightful power. Some party must oppose you and your plans. In that I place my hope and that of my children's future, or we won't have a country.
That America secured liberty at home and stood once again as a beacon to the world.
See, this is what I mean. Joe, America has stood as a beacon to the world for every day for the past 4 years that you and your party did not run the executive branch. It's a lie to claim that just because you weren't setting our nation's agenda, that were not a beacon to the world. Are we only a beacon on your terms with your precise policies?
We turn to those tasks of our time.
Translation. Mitch McConnell better do exactly what I say, or there will be hell to pay as I blame him for 100% of America's disunity, just like we did to the unique threat Trump. Only now it will be the unique threat McConnell.
Sustained by faith, driven by conviction, and devoted to one another and the country we love with all our hearts. May God bless America, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, America.
Traditionally, I support every new president as my commander-in-chief. I support the new president in his capacity as our nation's representative. I still do. But everything else about Biden's agenda and the agenda of his party, I oppose and resist. Not just for me, but for my children and their children and every American. What Joe Biden did to achieve absolute power is wrong. He and his party should not be rewarded for using a nonpartisan virus to divide our nation against itself. As Joe proves with his own words, his party divided us, not Trump. And they should be resisted by every American who pays their taxes, who loves their country, who joined our military and fought for this country, and who voted as they felt best for our nation. Joe Biden is not who he says he is, and the proof is in this divisive, harsh, dark, angry, bitter, judgmental, accusatory, and polarizing inaugural speech. Thank you.